Namaste and welcome to Urban Chatterati. Today I am with a very special guest, Professor Makarand R Paranjape, whose new book you must have read by now, JNU, Nationalism and India's Uncivil War. So Professor Paranjape, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Abhinavji. Perhaps I should just hold up the book for a moment so that people get to see it.
Yes.
And then
the JNU is in red, the complete red.
And the piche, it looks like this, the familiar placards and the culture of protest that has made us, should I say, infamous and notorious rather than celebrated all over the world.
But sir, there is famous in infamous. There is yash in apyash. So JNU is well known. Wherever you go, you tell are you from JNU? And then what do you people keep doing in JNU? All those things. But thank you, sir, for writing this book. And thank you for your time. Let's start with the discussion. The first obvious question will be, what prompted you to write this book? I mean, what are you trying to convey to the JNU fraternity and those outside the JNU by writing this book and the issue you have chosen, nationalism and India's uncivil war?
Exactly, Abhinavji. You're a JNUite too. And though I didn't study in JNU, today I happen to be JNU's senior most professor. I was a professor from 1999. And in other words, if JNU is celebrating its 50 years, and of these 50 years, about 40 were active, then I've been a professor for more than half the history of JNU, a full professor. So I'm a witness to the events that took place. And the last 5 or 6 years were cataclysmic, as you know. And the entire character of JNU has changed. But the reason I wrote the book is because I love JNU too, like you. I mean, we may disagree or agree with our leftist friends on certain matters, but JNU is a space of freedom and creative possibilities. People from all over the country come to JNU. Many are from very underserved and underprivileged regions, communities, and areas. And JNU changes their life. So JNU is a wonderful human experiment, Indian experiment, uniquely, I would say, free and creative space for me. So I was interested in saving JNU. At the same time, as you know, I got interpellated in the most, turbulent period of JNU's history, in recent times at least, 2016, with that Azadi Andolan within JNU. And I found, though, I'm not very deeply political, I think, from childhood, my joy has been in reading, writing, studying, talking. So I had my own, obviously, alignment. I'm right of center, as everyone knows. But I wasn't very active, whether it's in Januta or in the campus politics. But when I saw in 2016 that the entire campus was being turned into a political platform against an elected government, in this case of Narendra Modi ji, I felt there was something seriously wrong. And then I began to study this so-called youth movement, who was behind it. And I found that they were trying to create a groundswell among the youth against the Modi Sarkar. And of course, our own leaders at that time were very complicit. You'll remember that both Januta and Janusa were CPI-related, unions, and they were in cohorts. So I began to examine this phenomenon. And of course, in the Nationalism lecture series, somehow they invited me. And our great friend, ex-president of Janusa, Kanhaiya Kumar, said he would chair my meeting. I gave a talk that became viral. So I just got, without any conscious intention, center staged at that time. And I thought that I should write a book like a contemporary history, to tell the world what really happened in JNU. And the most important thing, Abhinavji, is I believe, and I've tried to argue in this book, that the debates that took place in JNU are, as it were, a miniature of the larger debates in India over the meaning of nationalism in India. तो राष्ट्रवाद, सही राष्ट्रवाद क्या होना चाहिए, इस पे जो देश भर में चर्चा हुई, उसका एक प्रतिबिंब हमें जेएनयू में मिलता है. सो फॉर मी जेएनयू एक बिंदु है जिससे हमें भारत की अंतरात्मा में झलक मिलती है. सो दिस इज माय थीसिस इन दिस बुक.
And it is very interesting because we don't find many people seriously engaging with these topics. You have some people writing what happened in the JNU. There were some books from the left-wing professors as well, but those were propaganda. Those were not serious engagement with the issues. So let me come to the issue itself, Professor. Why are you calling this India's uncivil war? The debate over nationalism, the meaning of nationalism, why is that a civil war? And in that sense, why is it uncivil war?
Okay, very good. See, the point is civil war is a griha yuddha. So civil war actually has a very bad connotation. It means that the country is fighting against itself. And most civil wars have been extremely violent. Like America's civil war caused more deaths than Americans died in the First World War. This is something we don't know. In 1865, they fought a civil war. So I'm calling it an uncivil war because this is not an out-and-out civil war with people killing each other. I think the partition was something like that, frankly. It's uncivil, I'm punning. It is a civil war. It is uncivil in the sense that, intellectually and culturally, it's like no holds barred. But luckily, it's not a civil war. So I didn't want to call it a civil war because it implies actual bloodshed. I call it an uncivil war because it's a cultural war. It's India's culture wars. And these culture wars are about the meaning of India and about what it means to be an Indian. And they've engulfed history, they've engulfed politics, they've engulfed religion, and they've engulfed, all aspects of civil society. So uncivil is here a kind of pun because the debate is uncivil. As well as I do, the two sides do not want to talk to each other. And one of the things my book does, it proposes an intermedial hermeneutics. Intermediality means when there are irreconcilable polarities, in society or even in the discursive space. The job of the intellectual is to mediate because dialogue is the essence of democracy. In fact, it is the essence of Sanatan Dharma, if you ask me. Sanatan Dharma is dialogic. It is not dialectical. And, for example, Hindus and Buddhists debated for 700 years, 800 years without any bloodshed. This is our tradition. Anyhow, so the book is about intermedial hermeneutics or a way of reading or interpreting or engaging on topics, where you're creating a space, and intermediality, ultimately is supposed to be remedial. Remedial meaning it should heal because the national fabric is sometimes torn asunder. Okay. We've seen it in Bengal, we've seen it in other parts of India. After elections, there's so much violence, or even during elections. Now, whatever the politics of, these incidents might be, but when it comes to intellectual life, cultural life, we must continue to have dialogue. So the book is intermedial and it is remedial. And it is the one thing I wanted to say, Abhinavji, since you're, an intellectual yourself, that we must begin by acknowledging that our own position is incomplete, is not perfect. Nobody's position is perfect. So the book is proposing that it's not, the only way you can create a space of engagement is by admitting, look, I may not have all the answers. My own position may be subject to correction, rectification, improvement. And the day our leftists accept that, I think the dialogue will start. Instead, they've made all kinds of people untouchables in JNU. I was an untouchable, though I don't consider myself an extremely right-wing or whatever, Hindutvavadi person. No, but I was boycotted. I was bullied. I was browbeaten. I was branded. As soon as I came to JNU, I was branded. ye to right wing hai, Sanghi hai, etc., etc. And finally, if they can't stop you through all these methods, they just bullshit you. They engage you with in nonsense. I mean, I had more than 10 open letters written against me, and I have replied to 5 of them. And that is also a part of the JNU Dastaveez. How you attack
too much of patience, sir. Too much of patience to engage with these people. But that's what we are supposed to do, sir. But sir, you rightly pointed out that there's a deficit in the dialogue, and in my personal experience, much of it comes from the position of the other side, which is the left. And very difficult to differentiate between liberals and the left these days, anyways. By the way, so very difficult to differentiate between a leftist, a liberal, and an Islamist in today's India. But why do you think that, despite all this glorification of JNU as a reason? As a place for reason, debate, discussion, freedom of expression, there is none of it there. In JNU, you can only have freedom of expression if you are just another shade of the red, right? And there's a repeated violence as well. JNU has a history of violence. Despite all the pretense they put up. In early 2000, when ABVP was rising in the campus, the left, the SFI used to indulge in massive violence against the ABVP. And in the recent years also, we have seen repeated episodes of violence where the left plans a targeted violence to stop the non-left formations, especially ABVP. Why do you think, what's wrong with JNU, that left and right can discuss and debate outside the JNU campus, but not inside?
See, Abhinavji, you know that JNU is the last bastion, of the left. And they are used to having state patronage to work against the state. They had created the system of what I call the reproduction of patronage. I'm using a Marxist terminology. Just as you have reproduction of inequality, you also have reproduction of patronage and privilege. And, ever since the Congress split, and then Mrs. Gandhi moved very close to the Soviet Union, the then Soviet Union, there was a tacit understanding that JNU would be given over, to the left in a way. And after, the collapse of Naxalbari under Siddhartha Shankar Rai, many of the leftists left Presidency College and they came in droves to JNU. So there's a history. And then they wanted to make sure that they would continue to thrive and flourish there. So one of the books talks about is that the people who accuse the other side of being intolerant are themselves deeply intolerant. They're intolerant of any dissent, any form of disagreement with the sanctioned mode of dissent. The sanctioned mode of dissent is leftist dissent against the state, against the BJP, against Hinduism in a way, etc., 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 and their unholy alliance with separatist forces, which was proven, Kashmiri separatists. There were morchas hailing the people who had attacked the parliament and who were given every possible remedy in our Indian system. I've talked about this. Now, you say you don't accept the legitimacy of the Indian state, and then you're invoking that state's constitution and its judicial due process of law by saying so-and-so has not been given due process. So the contradictions galore are laughable. And the ignorance of the new left, I call them new, because after the collapse of the Soviet Union, when they lost their mojo really, these are confused young people who, ek qisam ki dramabazi hai. I still remember 1 year after the incidents in JNU, I've got it in this book. People came with, marks on their face like makeup, and they're streaming down from the admin building towards the schools to, so to speak, enact the pellets which were wounding the stone throwers, in Kashmir at that time. Okay, I'm talking about, 2017, 1 year after 2016. And those same anniversaries of Afzal Guru, etc., were being done by these same leftists. They were wearing makeup, bandaging their heads. So what is going on? And you say, let's have a conversation. They don't want one. My building was gherra out. They didn't try to, they tried not to let me in, but I did get in. And I said, let's have a discussion. They don't want to have a discussion. So the violence that you're talking about is both intellectual violence, intimidation, gherawing, Even the ex-vice chancellor and other people were gheraued. So this has to be exposed. Those people who are talking about democracy, dissent, are people, and as you said, coercion and so forth, are people who do not respect democracy. They do not respect dissent. They do not hesitate to intimidate, even to resort to violence. So, who will tell that kind of truth telling, as I was calling it? That's what I thought I should do. That they have to be exposed. Their modus operandi needs to be told to the world, because they who accuse others of intolerance are the most intolerant themselves.
Yes, true. And you've also talked about this cultural war, which is underway in India. And I agree, there are many dimensions to that cultural war. But no, one of the side effects of the cultural war has been that the other places for academia, the recent debate and discussions, they're also suffering. People are being dragged into needless controversies for simplest of the things. If you're saying something that is second order, third order interpretation will be made out and you'll be branded this or that. So what do you think is the future of the India's public institutions, especially the public universities?
I think this is a very, very important topic, and it needs to be discussed very deeply. The fact of the matter is that, we have over politicized our campuses, especially those which specialize in humanities and social sciences. And these disciplines are extremely important. They're not only important for, public discourse, public opinion, or the future leadership of the country. They're important civilizationally. But what's happened is all these campuses have become dens or dens, as you may like it, of, this kind of negative politics. So one of the pleas I make in this book is not to shut down JNU or to destroy it, but to reform it. And the reform can begin when we keep a certain brand of politics at bay. I don't say keep it out, but academics should be reprioritized. I mean, I've written in this book that there's no country, no society, and no major or well-known university in the world where the kind of, so to speak, politics that characterizes JNU can be tolerated, which is you shut down the university for days on end, months on end, in this case, more than a year, just because of some political issue. No, the purpose of a university is to impart education. Okay, you have to get degrees, you have to attend classes, labs must function, and you cannot turn a university into a political boot camp. Okay, so this is the first thing. And this requires not just an educational policy from the top. I mean, the National Education Policy is a good document, but we've had great documents in the past. We need institutional reform and governance structures to be in place. Now, you go to any private college or university or managed, even by a trust like you're in Sri Ram College, it's so well managed. But why are our public universities in a mess? Why are there so many vested interests, you see, where the university's primary purpose, which is education, knowledge production, is considered unimportant. Sometimes it's only a job producing machine where certain types of people for generations, their children, their grandchildren, their nephews, nieces, everybody's related to everyone else when it comes to karamcharis, or when it comes to university jobs, people of a particular ideology are favored depending on the regime. So all this has to change. We must have transparency because it's our country, our money, taxpayers' money is going to fund these institutions. And billions and billions of rupees have been invested. JNU is sitting on a gold mine. The land is worth billions. So all this grabbing is going on, and this has to change. So this institutional reform should be a priority, and that requires political will. And too much bureaucracy. I mean, one secretary in Government of India is handling hundreds of institutions. How is that possible? So we need governance structures in place, and some of these structures are there, but they're not being followed. University autonomy should be respected, and the highest standards of accountability, as well as incentivizing those who are really working and producing, good research. They should be rewarded. but our extremely over-bureaucratized, over-politicized higher education is in serious need of reform.
Less is said about the bureaucracy, the better, sir. You would be knowing more about it. But I firmly believe, and this is my opinion, that we should not have bureaucrats in the Ministry of Higher Education and all. You should remove all the IS officers, all of them, and appoint direct people, experts, another thing. You are not, and it's a thing for both to the center and the state governments. Unless until you remove these people, because they are looking at education as just another job. They're not invested in the dynamics of the education. They're not invested. For them, it's just another posting. So you can't give them the decision-making power. Otherwise, it's the same trivial thing. Kitna samosa canteen mein jana chahiye, kitna ka khidki lagna chahiye. There is no macro thinking happening because of over bureaucratization. That's you rightly pointed out. But I think the reforms are underway, and the government is now very serious about NEP and restructuring the higher education in a better way. So let's wait. But what future do you see about this of this cultural war, and especially what future do you see of JNU going forward?
I must say that when I wrote the book, it was COVID, and I made the point that COVID is going to reboot JNU more effectively, in fact, than any political or other intervention. And that's exactly what happened. And you mentioned the NEP and the restructuring that's happening from the UGC down. There are some really good features. So I'm more optimistic than I was at the darkest hour when these, so to speak, hordes of outsiders descended on JNU, people were beaten up. That was very distressing for me because that shouldn't happen in a campus such as ours. But now, look at the new PhDs that have been taken in. All of them are GRFs, and these common entrance exams and so forth. When decentralization has failed in India, the IIT model is being, so to speak, imposed, where all central universities will have common entrance exams, and JNU too will be a part of this. And only GRFs have been taken, at least in my center and in many other centers. And things are looking up. People are more professional and they want to do well and not just to do politics. But it'll take some time. And JNU, I'm afraid, is a deeply fractured community right now. A healing touch is required. I hope the new VC will provide that healing touch. The administration is broken down. Apparently 400 files have not been cleared. You apply for leave, you get it after you go somewhere, you finish your duty, which you went out 15, 20 days later, the leave order comes. Nothing seems to work properly. Karamcharis are not being paid on time. Garbage is not being removed. So inside JNU, the atmosphere is very distressing, but I hope things improve. We have a budget deficit as well, and many things need to be done. But that after that so-called pulverization, now the rebooting is happening. And I hope in given time, things will improve. And the other good news, Abhinavji, as you know, somehow the JNU DNA is so remarkable, I feel, that even people who are recruited, for whatever ideological or other reasons, once they're in JNU, they somehow feel they should measure up. So the environment of JNU is still conducive to, ideation. And I'll just tell you, I want to end on a very positive note about JNU. I taught in IIT for a long time. Then I came to JNU, and the two cultures were very different. And in many respects, IIT is a problem-solving culture, okay? And JNU is a problem-encouraging or problem-coexisting culture. In other words, you continue to invest in the problem so that you have something to say and do. So this is the negative part. But the positive part is that the individual that JNU creates is not out of a mold. They are not nerds. They are not people without opinions. Every JNUite is different. The body language is different. And there's an individuality in that. There's a freshness to a JNU person. And even people belonging to particular political parties or political groups or ideologies, you sit them down over tea in Ganga Dhaba, they'll start criticizing their own, they'll say things. This is what makes JNU unique. JNU is a place where people eventually, after 1 or 2 years or whatever, they develop their own individual and unique perspective on India and on the world. And even if they group together for a particular reason, if you scratch below that collectivity, you'll find a very vibrant individual. And as to the negative forces, they are very small. I wouldn't say there are more than 100 when it comes to students. The really anti, whatever national you want to call them what you will. Those kinds of people are very few. And among the faculty, there are even fewer. And many are retiring. They're gone. So I think the future of JNU is bright.
That's very optimistic, sir. And I hope that your hopes are coming true in the coming years. We have a new Vice Chancellor now, and she is also a JNUite. I think she's the first woman Vice Chancellor ever. So we will see some changes in JNU, definitely. But thanks a lot for your time, sir. It was a wonderful discussion. The people outside JNU know so little about JNU, right? So perhaps they can, I think the campus is now completely open because all those crazy restrictions have gone. So I think that more people will visit JNU campus and visit your chamber to discuss and talk to you and get the book signed from you as well. But thanks a lot, sir, for coming to the show.
Thank you, Abhinavji.
And thank you, audience, for listening to us. If you like the channel, please subscribe to it. Thank you.